Okay, for this video, I wanted to cover the procedures a taxpayer needs to follow if they're trying to claim a child tax credit for the current year, but in a prior period, they also tried to claim a child tax credit and it was disallowed by the IRS. If you are in that position, you need to file the Form 8862 with your tax return in order to continue claiming it in future years. Okay, so I want to go over the form itself, some of the requirements around this, and then an example to illustrate kind of how this works. So the Form 8862 has to be attached to your tax return if you're claiming the child tax credit and you had it disallowed or reduced partially in a prior year, and it was for a reason other than just a math or a clerical error. So what they mean there is, let's say math error means you just got the amount wrong. So if the child tax credit was $2,000 and you put down $2,200 for some reason, then they would just reduce it to $2,000 and there's really no big deal. The most common issue we see with CTCs being disallowed is the taxpayer claims their child as a dependent and qualifying child, but they always miss one element. And the most common one is this residency requirement. Right, so remember that in order for your child to be claimed as a dependent, they have to meet a number of factors, right? The child has to meet the age test, has to be a citizen or resident of the United States. The child can't provide more than one half of their own support. And then they also have to meet this residency requirement, right? The residency requirement is that you as the parent, the child lives with you for more than one half of the year. So where this becomes an issue most of the time, when you have separated parents, divorced parents, or couples that have kids and just perhaps never lived together. So in our example here, we're going to look at John and Jane, married couple that got divorced, and how John kind of got into this trouble with the child tax credit. So John and Jane were married, they had one son together, and then they divorced in February 2020. Now, after they divorced, their son, who's 5 years old at the time, continued to live with Jane for the remainder of the year, right? So the remainder of those 11 months out of the year. John moved out of the home. He lived in a separate apartment, but he did continue to provide monetary support to Jane and his son, right? And so John, when he went to prepare his own Form 1040, he's kind of briefly going over the dependency rules and the CTC rules, and he thinks, oh, well, I provided more than one half the support, I did all this other stuff. But what he forgot was the residency piece. He forgot that my son no longer lives with me more than one half the year. I'm in a different home. I'm no longer the custodial parent, so I cannot claim him, right? So John prepares his 1040. He claims his son as a dependent and the qualifying child for the CTC. And then the IRS catches the return, flags it, and discovers that, well, his son failed the residency requirement for John. So when the IRS catches this, they deny the claim, and what they'll do is they'll send John an IRS CP79 notice that says, hey, we denied your child tax credit claim for whatever reason. Perhaps they might add some additional information. And then it'll say something to the effect of, going forward, if you qualify for the child tax credit and you want to claim it, you have to also include a Form 8862 and attach it with your return, okay? So let's go over the next slide and get into some more of the details here. Now, what are the CP79 notices? Well, there's two kinds and they're very different. The CP79 notice, the one that John got, simply says that the claim is disallowed and you need to file the 8862 going forward. Okay, no big deal. The 79 Cap A notice is a bit more troublesome. This is a notice that not only says that your claim was denied and you have to file 8862 going forward if you want to claim it again, but the reason we disallowed your claim is because you either recklessly or intentionally disregarded the rules and regulations. And so what they will do is they will give you a 2-year ban on being able to claim the credit. So in a subsequent year, let's say you do absolutely qualify to be able to take a child tax credit. You're on a 2-year ban, so you can't claim the credit, right? Now, what's reckless or intentional disregard? In John's case, he didn't reach that level, right? He honestly thought that he was eligible to claim the child, and he did so, and he just made a mistake. Reckless or intentional disregard is a heightened level of scrutiny where you really kind of did know what the rules were, and you just said, well, tackle that anyway. I'm going to see if I don't get caught. And so if the IRS determines that that's the case, yeah, you're in trouble. You're looking at a 2-year ban. Okay, so now let's look at how the fact pattern could change a little bit in the subsequent year, and see if John can now claim the child tax credit. So for 2021, let's assume that the son moves out of Jane's home and into John's house or apartment, right? And so the son spends 8 months collectively during the year living with John. Well, now it's changed, right? Now the son lives with John for more than 1/2 of the year. So the son meets that residency requirement for John to be able to claim his son as a dependent and get the child tax credit, okay? So now in 2021, remember, John hasn't been prohibited from claiming the CTC because he only got a 79 notice, not a 79A with a 2-year ban. So when he does his Form 1040, he completes the 8812, all right, that's the child tax credit form, but he also must complete the 8862, and he must attach this to his return. If he doesn't do that, then he runs the risk of having the claim denied again, right? And the IRS, what our argument would be, well, you didn't follow all the procedures again, right? We told you if you can claim it again, you've got to do all of these forms. You've got to do the 8862 form now. Okay, so after John files his form, there is a chance it could get flagged again, put on hold, because the IRS, you're already on their map, so to speak, right? They know that you've claimed credits in the past that you weren't eligible for, so they might take a closer look at it. But as long as you qualify and you've got all the required forms and schedules in your return, including the 8862, you should be okay. Now, if for some reason John decides that he doesn't want to file the CTC again for this year, he can sign the release. He can sign that 8332 as the custodial parent and allow Jane to claim the child as a dependent. And so, Jane could have done this last year, but neither Jane or John were really, aware of the rules or not that educated on the rules. But this year, they've done a little more due diligence, and so they know that, okay, John can claim the child for the child tax credit. If for some reason he decides he does not want to, or it makes better sense for Jane to do it, then she can do it instead, okay? Okay, so that covers the slides. Let's jump into the form itself. Okay, so here is the 8862 form, information to claim certain credits after disallowance. Okay, so the focus of this video is on the child tax credit, but this form and these procedures can be filed if you have either of these credits disallowed, right? So the earned income tax credit, the child tax credit is what we're working on, or the American Opportunity Tax Credit if you're a college student and you're trying to claim the AOTC, right? So the same principles for the most part apply, right? If you try to claim the EITC or the American Opportunity Credit in a prior year and it was disallowed for some reason because you didn't meet all the elements, going forward, if you want to try to claim those again, you've got to complete the 8862. Now, it's also possible that you could have tried to claim all of these credits and had all of them denied, right? If that's the case, then you would check all these boxes and complete all the parts. But in our example, we're just focusing on the child tax credit, so we're just going to work on that one piece. So the 8862, we've got the name at the top here, John Doe, his social security number, and in part one, we are indicating the year we're filing this form. So we are filing this with John's 2021 tax return. And then in part one, we are checking the child tax credit, and we leave the other two boxes blank because we're not dealing with those pieces. So part two is the earned income credit. Again, not applicable to us, right? In section A, it's asking us to do these sections if we're claiming the earned income credit. Again, we're not doing that piece. We're just going to part three, right? So a nice little sheet or reference up here. It says on the sheet, complete part three if we're doing child tax credit, right? So we can skip two and jump down to part three. There we go. Okay, so part three, child tax credit, refundable or non-refundable. So enter the name of each child. In this case, John just has one kid. If you have multiple children that you're claiming, you would enter the name for each child, right? So child Doe here in line 12. Line 13, we're not claiming any other dependents, right? These are just our children. So question 14, for each child listed in response to question 12 up here, did the child live with you for more than half the year or meet an exception, right? So a lot of this is just due diligence. They really want to make it clear that you are meeting all of these elements and you are checking off yes, okay? So in this case, yes, the child did live with me, John, for more than half the year. The exception would be, things like the tiebreaker rule for married couples, or the release of the dependency exemption, right? If the child lived with Jane for 11 months, but she wanted to release the exemption for John, and then he met all the other elements, that would be okay, right? So we would meet the exemption. Question 15, for each child listed in response to question 12, did the child meet the requirements to be a qualifying child for the CTC, right? So this is, again, go back to the child tax credit rules. Make sure you are meeting every single element, okay? Question 16, for each person claimed as a qualifying child, is that person your dependent? Again, go back to the rules, look at what does it take to be a dependent. I have a separate video on the child tax credit requirements. I'll put a link to that below so you can review that as well. I go into more depth there about who can claim the child tax credit. Now, question 17, for each person claimed as a qualifying child or other dependent, is that person a citizen, national, or resident of the U.S.? Again, this is one of the elements to be a dependent, right? And so, again, I would reference the video I've done before on what you need to do to qualify for the child tax credit. But again, in this case, yes. And that's the end of the form. So you'll notice that there's not a lot of additional information on this other than the due diligence you've already seen on the Form 8812. Again, I think that what they're really trying to do here is just hammer home the necessary requirements to be able to claim the dependent. So, excuse me. Okay, so so that covers it for this video. I hope that was helpful. Again, just remember, always be on the lookout for IRS notices, right? If you had a claim denied, you should receive some type of CP79 notice, which will give you a little more information on what you need to do. But definitely remember to file this form if you had a credit denied in a prior period, because again, you don't want to have it denied again because you didn't file the 8862. So, all right, so that covers it again. Thanks so much for watching, and I look forward to seeing you again on the next video. Thank you.